So let's just rip the Band-Aid off, go right to a quarterback check-in post minicamp and have a little bit of a nuanced conversation, the three of us. I want to peel behind the curtain because one thing that we get the grace from our bosses to do is to be honest with people, right? So I feel like the last time we said anything about Shedeur and it got clipped off, it got a little contentious. I got contentious with some Browns fans. Frank and I got contentious on behalf of, like, Browns fans are angry about this. And we're going to talk about Shedeur, obviously, but I just think there has to be some caveat here of the why and the how. Like, that's what this show's about, right? Like, part of the reason we talk about Shedeur is because it is what is the most interesting to the broadest set of Browns followers, to fans, to people across the league. Like, if you go to some random person in Montana that barely follows the NFL, they may not know what the stories are for the Jags, but they sure as hell know, if they're an NFL fan, that Shedeur is trying to become the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. Like, there is some level of importance to this conversation because it does mean something, given the way he was hyped up, given the way there were expectations in the draft, given what happened in the draft. Like, Jori, these are all bricks in the Shedeur wall. And I just feel like sometimes we got to kind of remind people why that wall exists and why we talk about it so much.
Yeah, my mentions were wild after the last episode of the show that I was on. I mean, Fitz, literally, thank you. You were like, sorry about everything everyone's saying. I know you don't care, but it was my first true exposure to what the Browns fan base could be. So for all of you listening, thanks for tuning in. But I definitely think that people have taken these other societal debates and different people have basically taken other things that they're concerned about in society and trying to superimpose it onto the Shedeur Sanders debate. And based off what you think about something else, you're either extremely pro-Shedeur or extremely anti-Shedeur, despite the fact that the man has not even played in a preseason game yet and not taken a first-team rep in practice. You would think, based off my mentions, that Jori Epstein was the one denying Shedeur Sanders all of these first-team reps in practice that every other quarterback was getting. So there were some wild things. But to me, really, when I got down to my whole Shedeur's fourth on the depth chart right now, and I'm not saying he's always going to be fourth on the depth chart, there were multiple reasons, including the fact that I flew to Cleveland and watched where everyone else got first-team reps, and that was for a reason. I also think that when I talk to people, and I talked to General Manager Andrew Berry, Head Coach Kevin Stefanski, Offensive Coordinator Tommy Rees, all four quarterbacks talked in the 2 days that I was there, and what the decision makers continued to tell me about what they wanted out of their quarterback is, and I'll quote Tommy Rees on this, decision-making and processing. And Andrew Berry told me the team wants someone who is an efficient operator and will make good decisions with the football. Those are the number one things they're looking for in a week one starter. So I'm not saying Shedeur will never play, and I'm not saying that Dillon Gabriel won't start later in the season. I would not be surprised if we saw him at some point, because if you're the Cleveland Browns, you have to not only understand what you have in 2025, but also, do you want to package your multiple first-round picks in 2026 to move up and get the quarterback you want, or do you have that guy on the roster? But I think when you look at this, if decision-making and processing are something that they're putting at a premium, well, Joe Flacco's been in the league forever, and Kenny Pickett's also had a decent amount of experience. And as much as everyone wanted to go crazy in my mentions about Shedeur Sanders' number of offensive coordinators at the two schools he was at, you're still not going to convince me that that is more exposure than what Dillon Gabriel had with 6 years at 3 different schools. So, there is a different level of reps. And I think we saw this in San Francisco when Brock Purdy came in and Trey Lance was there. And I understand that Trey Lance had an injury, but I think the number one thing that definitely made a difference for them is Trey Lance had a pretty crazy low number of reps at the college and high school levels at quarterback. And Brock Purdy started for 4 years at Iowa State. So even if he didn't have that same playmaking high-level ceiling, the floor was just so much higher because the mental bank of reps to draw upon was much deeper. And I think that's what we're seeing in the Cleveland Browns quarterback contest.
Absolutely. I mean, if you suggest that Shedeur Sanders isn't going to be the locked-in starter by week one and probably for the next decade, a lot of these Shedeur backers just lose their minds. How dare you? How dare you not say that he's going to beat out Dillon Gabriel, who was drafted 2 rounds ahead of him, or the 2 veterans they brought in, and he's going to just vault from 4th to 1st on the depth chart. That happens at every single training camp. It's a very weird phenomenon. I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't ready for it. It reminds me in some ways, a completely different example, but in some ways very similar, of Tim Tebow, where people just lose their minds about Tim Tebow. There's no rational conversation about Tim Tebow. It was, and it's the same way with Shedeur. there's posts they go up on social media of him throwing a pass that literally any NFL quarterback can throw. And the caption will just be like, how could the NFL possibly have let this guy slip to the 5th round? He's going to be a Hall of Famer. Like, well, what are we doing here? But yes, Shedeur is an oddball case of a 5th round pick who is the most talked about rookie in the NFL right now. I was just on talking with your people, Fitz in Nashville radio, just talking about how Cam Ward has just been completely overshadowed because of Shedeur Sanders, a 5th round pick. It's unlike anything else. But yes, I mean, if we're taking a step back and looking at this logically, people say, oh, draft position doesn't matter once the draft is over. It does matter. It absolutely matters. The Cleveland Browns told us 2 months ago that we like Dillon Gabriel a lot more than we like Shedeur Sanders. That's why they drafted him 2 rounds ahead of him. So Shedeur has a long way to go before he's relevant in this quarterback competition. It could happen, but he probably needs some injuries and some other breaks in front of him to realistically have a shot like Dak Prescott did a few years ago when he was a rookie. But it won't stop the conversation. Every single pass Shedeur Sanders makes in the preseason is going to be dissected, talked about by us, talked about by fans, all over social media. If he has one good game in the preseason in the 4th quarter against a bunch of guys who are going to be selling insurance in September, it's going to be proof that he's going to Canton, right? They're just going to waive the 5-year waiting period for him. Again, this is unlike anything I've seen other than Tim Tebow. That's the only thing I can compare it to.
I definitely think you're right. And the Dak comparison is great. And I use that a lot when talking to people during my trip to the Browns, because when Dak was a rookie, 4th round pick, so Shedeur's the 5th round pick, Dak was drafted slightly above him. He was the 4th string quarterback. But then Kellen Moore broke his ankle, and he was the number 2 quarterback at the time. Tony Romo got hurt in the preseason game and had the fracture to his spine. And then you had Jameel Showers, who became a safety rather than a quarterback. But the reason I think it's so relevant is not just the injuries, it's the reminder that if you're Shedeur Sanders, not only do you need to absolutely light it up, both in terms of your mastery of the playbook and in terms of your playmaking on the field, which is challenging, you also have to have things outside of your control go really, really well. And so when you're the Browns, that's kind of what they're harping on, which is that you don't control this quarterback competition. You control what you're able to do, which, again, I would say that of the possible things Shedeur could do to win this job, I don't think he has gotten top marks on all of them. That's not necessarily that. It's going to take time to learn. It's okay. That is very normal for rookies. But on top of that, even if he was crushing it, you would still have all of this experience of, hey, Kevin Stefanski is really comfortable with Joe Flacco because of what they've done together before.
And by the way, it's not just the normal for any rookie. It's more than normal for a 5th round pick. We should not expect any 5th round pick to just walk into the starting lineup. That doesn't happen very often, but people think it does. And don't you think, Jori, that for either rookie, let's bring Dillon Gabriel into it, talk about overshadowed. The Browns aren't going to want to expose either of those guys early in the season because their early season schedule is so difficult. Why would you want to start Dillon Gabriel in week 1 and have him go 0-6? What's the point in that? Don't you think the early season schedule matters to these coaches where they kind of know, like, look, this is not an easy landing spot for a rookie quarterback. Let's let Kenny Pickett take some lumps or Joe Flacco take some lumps.
I will say quickly here, to that end, with the Dillon Gabriel portion of this conversation, one thing that gets stuck in my head is when I talked to Max Crosby after he signed his first massive deal and we were getting a tattoo together. And I asked Max how it felt like knowing that he was generationally wealthy in that moment. And his first response was, nothing changed in my life. I still went to the gym this morning at 4:30 a.m. But he said also, they never forget the number next to your name. They never forget where you were drafted. And one of the points that he made to me in that conversation was that the fact is, not only did he have to win his job, he had to beat out everybody that didn't think he should have been drafted, that didn't think that thought that there were better players ahead of him. Like, if you think about it organizationally from the Browns, they should want their 3rd round draft pick to beat out their 5th round draft pick at quarterback. Like, ultimately, they just want to get a quarterback. But if you're just talking about the way everything's going to lay out within the room, there is some part of this conversation that you'd have to have as a coaching staff, as scouts, as a GM, as front office, as overall. You have to say, hey, there's a reason we took Dillon Gabriel 2 rounds before we took Shedeur. Like, if they're looking at their own system honestly, but based on just the way they drafted, the Browns should want Dillon Gabriel to go out and clearly win this job, which means Shedeur's going to have to not only play lights out for him, he's going to have to play better than Dillon Gabriel through every ounce of this to justify the change in that simply because of where he was drafted.
I definitely think that's the case. And I think when you look at this, also to me, this is not a four-way quarterback competition. This is a two-part quarterback competition.
Yes,
So
yes,
is Kenny
very well
Pickett
put.
or Joe Flacco going to start week one? To me, unless Dillon Gabriel just absolutely goes off, I think that one of the veterans will be starting week one. I don't know if the other will be on the roster. Andrew Berry told me on the record that absolutely they could keep four. I still have questions about that. And then I think the second question is which of the rookies is going to get the chance to show what they could do later in the season, Dillon Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders. Dillon Gabriel currently, both from a draft standpoint and from a performance and mastery of playbook standpoint, has the edge on that. So to me, there's this it's a two-part, two-quarterback competition. This is not a four-quarterback competition in terms of who's starting week one. As you said, that schedule's insane. They start off with the Bengals, the Ravens, the Packers, the Lions, the Vikings, and the Steelers in the first 6 weeks. Then you get the Dolphins in week 7, followed by the Patriots in the bye week. That is where I would expect that unless they feel like they're really contending, we have the chance for a switch. And I think that we see this happen all the time with the New England Patriots and Drake May last year. Everyone kind of knew when that soft spot was that they felt like they could acclimate Drake May. Now, I was actually surprised they started Drake May for the first time against the Houston Texans. I went to New England for that game, and I really thought they were going to wait another week, but they wanted to start him at home and whatever. I mean, to his credit, he held up well despite the score not reflecting what you would want for your first start. Like, he as a quarterback was not the primary problem in my opinion, but I think there's definitely that element. I also think that if you're Shedeur Sanders off the field, you've got to button it up a little bit. He was cited twice this month in June for speeding, and while one of the times he was driving, he was driving 91 in a 65 and then 101 also. So 41 miles over the 60 mile per hour speed limit. I don't think the Browns are going to cut him or not start him because he's speeding, but I think that if you are already last in the quarterback competition and then you start having these violations going 40 plus miles over the speed limit, it's definitely not going to help your case in terms of them believing that they can trust you for the job. And I also think, I'm very grateful that nothing bad happened, but we have seen, unfortunately, Fitz, with your team in Vegas, and we've seen this with Rashee Rice as well, that there have been some very serious injuries and accidents that have happened because of whether it's speeding or racing or all of these different things that happen when these guys speed. Obviously, it happens when non-players speed as well, but we've seen it specifically in the NFL. So I think that that's something that Shedeur should definitely really consider.
Can I be honest, too? Like, the 101 in a 65 is jarring, right? But it was even more jarring for me, guys.
In a 60.
Or in a 60. And 101 in a 60. But it was even more jarring for me to find out that that was his second massive speeding ticket. Like, because I think a lot of us, you look down, you're like, oh, yeah, I got a little lead in my foot. Like, I'm driving like an idiot. Okay, that happens. But when it's like, oh, by the way, this isn't the only time that he was in that range. Like, because if you're driving 90 or if you're driving 100, kind of, Frank, you're in the same range to me. Like, I do think there's a little bit of like, wow, the first time didn't slow him down. So now we got 2 tickets in a month. Like, that's attention you don't need.
Yeah, it's just, don't do it. Like, it's not the biggest deal in the world, I don't think. And I don't think the Browns think it's that big of a deal. But, you don't want this adding up and all of a sudden, and to be fair, Shedeur has really never been in trouble off the field. Like, that's not part of what he is. He's always been a pretty good citizen, right? Like, there's never any news that he's really a troublemaker that way. So I don't think it's a big deal. But yes, it just, don't do it. Don't be dumb. Don't be driving 101 miles an hour. It's very easily avoidable. And I think, he's a young guy. He probably, hopefully, learned his lesson after, like you said, the second time getting pulled over doing excessive speeding. So, but yeah, it doesn't help your case at all. It's not what the Browns want to be dealing with. I'm sure Kevin Stefanski is like, what are we talking about here, Shedeur? What are you doing? Come on. Like, you just don't want that, especially from a rookie who is supposed to be seen and not heard.
All right, so let's take a look at some of the other quarterbacks, because I think we can all agree that the Shedeur Dillon, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, this is the beginning of Shedeur versus Dillon, and it's going to last months, and we're no closer to any sort of an answer right now than we were.
And people are going to be blown away when Dillon Gabriel gets the first start over Shedeur Sanders. They are going to be on the floor like, can't believe this is happening because Shedeur Sanders walks on water to them. Like, the fan base is nuts. The fan base is crazy right now over Shedeur Sanders Dillon Gabriel was drafted 2 rounds ahead of him for a reason. Like that just happens. So,
right. And in
whatever.
addition to the like computer like processing that Dillon Gabriel has shown the Browns and has really impressed them with, I think that when you think about the biggest knock on Dillon Gabriel being his height and the question of, hey, is he going to be able to see over the offensive lineman? Is his height going to be an impediment? Kevin Stefanski's offense actually is really well suited to that because the timing it requires and the level of anticipation, you're not going to be seeing the target you're throwing to anyway based off the anticipation that they're asking you to throw with. And so even if you can't see it, as long as you're on time and the receiver's on time, I actually don't think that's going to be as big of an issue as we might think it would be.
And the Browns knew how tall Dillon Gabriel was when they drafted him. It's not like he showed up and they were like, oh my goodness, you're 5'11". We thought you were 6'4". Like they knew how tall he was. They were ready for this.
I just want to be a beacon of light in a dark, dark world for Browns fans right now. If you love Shedeur Sanders and you think Shedeur is going to be the next Tom Brady, well, if Dillon Gabriel beats him out for that first start, man, then you got somebody even better than the next Tom Brady. Like, come on, like this is. I'm trying to be positive here, everybody. Like, I think
you are very positive. Yeah.
Look,